about the whale. Nantucket is the whale. Everyone knows, I'm sure, especially those of you who are born and raised here, you know, in the 18th and 19th century, Nantucket really found itself to be a very important place. Everyone knew it. The whalers were the best in the world and provided whale oil for energy to people all over the globe. And then when that business dried up, it moved to tourism here on Nantucket. And one of the things that I think is so important is, well, we'll talk a little bit more about that, but tourism really kind of drives the economy now, as I'm sure everybody here realizes. So let's just go back in time. Let's go back a few presidential administrations ago to the Obama administration when they developed or created the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. And BOEM, as it's called, really sort of parallels what the Bureau of Land Management does on land. BOEM is tasked with developing our oceans for energy. At that time, they set up some leased areas off the east coast of the United States, from Maine down to the Carolinas, and then they put these leases out for bid, and all of the leases were purchased to develop it for offshore wind by foreign energy conglomerates. So I think that that's kind of an important piece in the equation. This image is actually BOEM's image. We added the whale's tail, but this is their image, their rendering of what things might look like off of Ladies Beach. But it's really only reflecting one of the projects. If you look at the horizon line, you'll see what's out there. Again, this is their image. This is not something that we created. It's missing substations, platforms, and vessels, which will be out there all the time. So just to think about that.
Can you all see that, the little things? They look little, but they're not so little.
Yeah, they're not so little.
Oh, and I have stuff to hand out.
Well, we'll do that.
If they're
So,
good
relax.
eyes,
So,
then they can
we'll do it after. So, but you know, when you look at that, just bear in mind how special Nantucket is. You all realize Nantucket is the largest National Historic Landmark in the United States and one of the oldest. So when you look at that, we're going to talk a lot about that as this progresses, but I think that's a very important piece of information that you should keep in mind. We can go to the next one, thanks.
It's delayed, so you
It's all right, it's delayed. So
It'll go.
It's okay. On this one here, so this is a map. You'll see it about 3 o'clock. The island of Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard north of the blue, what I'm calling like the rectangular Pac-Man. The rectangular blue Pac-Man represents the Vineyard Wind 1 project. This is the first project. It has been reviewed simply as a standalone project. This is 85 square miles of turbines, which will have about 85 turbines. Each turbine requires about 1 square mile of land. You'll see that it's about 14 miles south of Nantucket, and you'll also understand, I hope, that when we talk a little bit more about the actual turbines, these turbines will be very viewable from all of Nantucket's South Shore beaches, among other areas on the island. It's also important to understand, we're going to again talk about this later, that is right smack in the waters where the endangered North Atlantic right whale lives, breeds, and raises its young. So again, all of the government's work has just been focused so far, just considering Vineyard Wind 1, not what's coming down the pipe. Thanks, you could do the next one. So on this one, we're gonna zoom in. I'm going to the turbine, like the tower one. Okay, we're gonna zoom in and talk a little bit about a turbine. So if you look here, this yellow one here, this has got some wording, but right here, this is the height of the turbine at Nantucket High School. These are tiny, those are chump change next to what's going out there. The one next to it is actually an inaccurate rendering of what they look like now. They are being, as the plans are developing, these turbines are larger than that. So if you see, that is taller already than the John Hancock Tower in Boston. For you New Yorkers, it's taller than the Chrysler Building in New York. So these will be upwards of probably 1,000 feet by the time construction really begins. It's also important to understand the massing. The blade diameter on these are about like 2 football fields wide. It's like, yeah, they're huge. So, imagine 200-yard wide blade sweep, and they're really, really massive. It's also important to understand that each will be filled with lubricating oil. They have to be lubricated to keep the parts moving to turn it. But we're not talking about like the kind you put in your car. We're talking about thousands of gallons of lubricating oil in each one of these. The rotors that's inside the actual turbine itself are constructed with rare earth minerals, which really, in the end of the day, end up being quite bases and the rest of the structure are composed of things like cement, lots of cement, and I don't know how well you know your processes, I sure didn't before this, but cement is one of the most carbon intensive processes that there is. The blades are either made of carbon fiber or sometimes fiberglass, and they're constructed with steel. There will be lights, contrary to what you hear. I've read the construction and operations plan that they've talked about. In order to protect vessels, there absolutely will be lights on these all the time. They will be pile driven. Am I blocking you guys?
No, not at all.
Okay, they will be pile driven into the sea floor. To put a structure up that's 1,000 feet tall, imagine what has to go down. So there will be steel rods pile driven into the sea floor where our animals and stuff live. The other thing to understand is that their life expectancy is roughly 20 to 25 years. Now, they have never put turbines in the North Atlantic Ocean here, the Northeast Atlantic Ocean. You know, these are pretty rough waters, and we have a lot of hurricanes. They've not done this before. I think 20 to 25 years, just saying, sounds aggressive to me. They are also constructed of all the parts I talked to you about. They're non-recyclable, and they will be toxic when the project is finished. So when their life cycle ends at 20 to 25 years, and each year that they're in operation, their efficiency deteriorates, okay? So they might work at a great level here, but at the 20 to 25 year level, they're pretty much defunct. They have to remove them, and it's very unclear as to where the turbine burial ground is gonna be. Thanks, Don. This one here just shows what the substations and platforms will look like. They, you know, just to give you an idea, the renderings aren't really including these, but there will be substations that will be up there during construction, but also substations are used to amp up the voltage, to amp up the high voltage energy. So when it's transmitted back to land, they have to hit those substations. So there will be big construction out there aside from the turbines as well. These will also hold thousands of gallons of oil in each of these. They will also require vessels to maintain them regularly. So there'll be a lot of traffic out there. And firefighting foam, yes. So this is what's really happening. So the blue Pac-Man that I showed you earlier on this map is actually this green Pac-Man. Here's Little Nantucket. This is what's coming. Okay, these are all of the projects that will follow along. This will be massive. That is 1,600 square miles of turbines. That is larger than the state of Rhode Island. That will be right offside our coast. And again, you know, that will be viewed from everywhere on the island. And again, that is heavy duty construction power plant right where the North Atlantic right well lives, and among other things. Go ahead. Now I know we have some fishermen in the crowd, so this is a map, a chart that you guys are probably pretty familiar with. This was actually John's idea, to get a map that showed, you can see where this is essentially the same wind farm configuration you're seeing here, except that you can see the depth charts underneath them. So you can see where that is. It's pretty much north of the shipping lanes, and it's 14 miles south of Nantucket. So that's kind of a big deal. Now,
Pink things on the shipping lane?
yeah. So this again, NOAA's website, and actually today I talked to a guy, I don't know if any of you fishermen know Mike Pierdenonk. Does he recognize, does anybody know his name? I ended up talking to him today. He's the vice chair of the Mass Fishing Advisory Committee. He's also a board member of the New England Fishing Management Council. I think he's a very involved fisherman, both on commercial and on recreational. Both of these guys have answered the same question. I said, like, how is this going to impact fishing? Between him and what I've read on the website, it's pretty unclear. During construction, there will be setbacks for sure for fishermen, recreational, all fishermen. There will definitely be setbacks. Once the project is complete, I think that there will be a lot more leeway for what fishermen can do, but the project won't be complete for more than a decade for sure. There is, you know, certainly this is going to be very, very disruptive into the.
Are you talking about the Pac-Man?
What's going to happen
The
is
original
the Pac-Man.
Pac-Man. That's
whole
10
thing,
years, or the whole
This whole
crazy.
thing could take decades. It's going to take
Decades.
a lot of time.
Yeah.
30 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, that's what I
So
was.
it's going to be,
I thought
it'll be very disruptive out there to mostly the people or the animals that live there,
But
to
if
the
it takes
whales,
30
to the
years,
fish.
if it takes you 30 years, they're going to be already
Right. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Time to
Absolutely.
redo
So
the
they'll
new.
be-
Exactly.
We'll just-
Right.
We'll just keep,
exactly. So
Updating.
during construction and operation, this area will be very disrupted for the marine life that lives there and very difficult
For
to
30
navigate for
years.
others. There'll be noise, there'll be vibrations, there'll be vessels. It's going to be, it'll be, I think, very challenging for marine life to live out there. So this shows the cabling. So what we haven't really talked about is turbines will be out there, but how do we harness the energy? We have to bring cables to get the energy to shore. So you can see that there will be some serious cabling that'll go right through the Muskegon Channel. That's, between Martha's Vineyard and, Nantucket's Little Islands, and it'll go right through Nantucket Sound and come ashore at places like Barnstable, etc., on the Cape. These cables are carrying high voltage energy. They are, electric. They must be plow driven under the sea floor, but they can't really be plow driven deeply under the sea floor. They can go about 6 feet under because they have to be able to keep cool. If they're under too deep, the wires heat up and then we have outages. So they will be about 6 feet, but here's the problem. Anybody who's ever been in the ocean for 2 minutes, the sea floor is a dynamic place. It moves. So I think they'll have places where these cables will be very buried and places where they'll be exposed. For example, off Block Island, the five smaller turbines that they put there, they've had a lot of trouble keeping the cabling underneath. And these are dangerous high voltage cables. So again, it'll be tough to operate. It'll be tough to navigate through that traffic, and again, very disruptive to marine life. Yes, John?
Amy, are those cables east of Nantucket and east of Cape Cod? Those two parallel lines?
Yep.
Yes.
They're gonna go
And-
around Nantucket. Yep.
So all that gray,
These will be, any of these lines, these are cables. This one's hooking up in Mystic, and you'll notice that, we'll just talk about it later, there's not one cable coming to Nantucket, which is
Yeah.
actually a good thing in the end. But it is pretty interesting that's a fact. So all of these projects have their own cables. They will come ashore in different locations. Yes. they'll-
from different leases, I see.
different
Yeah.
leases. They're all different companies. So they are, as I was saying earlier, all of the leases were purchased by foreign energy companies, and then they created LLCs. So there's limited liability companies with pretty names like Vineyard Wind, Mayflower Wind. They're all Ørsted, Iberdrola, Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners. It's, these are not small companies that are doing this. All right, we can go to the next one. Okay, this is a photograph that was taken by NASA. The white dots are turbines and the streaks are sediment plumes. So with the currents in the water, it's rustling up sediment and essentially making water very murky for the animals who live in the water. So animals that work with gills to breathe in oxygen are going to have trouble in this area because it will be filled with sand and sediment. So that's just one thing I wanted to show you. You can go to the next one. So there are a lot of unknowns. As I said earlier, these will emit sound. You know that you guys have probably all seen the articles about offshore wind turbines on land turbines, and how people get sick when they live near them. There's been many cases of municipalities around the country, hundreds of them that go, the press doesn't pick it up. Like many hundreds of them where municipalities have been effective in keeping the land turbines out because they are unhealthy. The same thing is going to happen in the ocean. They're going to have sound. So I think what's clear is that NOAA Fisheries, that's the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA Fisheries has made it pretty clear that more research is needed, that they really don't know what these impacts will be on marine life. So I think you can go to the next one. We also don't know what the impacts will be on weather. I think this is really pretty interesting. NOAA has said that this may alter things like currents, weather patterns, fog, and water temperature. Now, if you really think about it, is Nantucket going to never have fog again? Will we always have fog? We don't know. I think if you are putting out a wind farm in the ocean that is taking wind out of the air, that you will probably affect water temperature. Temperatures in those areas will probably rise. And that's one of the things that they're speculating. They're also speculating that this may not just be local impacts, meaning exactly where the turbines are, but these could also have regional effects. You can go to the next one, thanks. So if you look here, this is what's coming to the United States. That's Maine down to Charleston, South Carolina. Lots of these are coming, and this map is outdated. There have been, I don't know if you've been listening to news, but more and more areas have been leased since. So this is behind. We will have lots of these. So who knows what these many arrays of wind farms will end up doing to our climate, both locally in those locations, as I said, and more broad. Thanks. Here's another thing to think about, electromagnetic frequencies. So there will be little frequencies coming from the rotors themselves where the rare earth minerals are, and also in the cabling. It is pretty safe to bet that this will have an impact on the marine population. In fact, NOAA Fisheries has said existing evidence that there are potential risks from cables on marine life. This will impact things like their ability to navigate. It will probably impact their predator detection senses and also communication among them. I think something that I read about today was also that these EMFs may attract some fish. Sharks and skate may be attracted to this. Other fish will probably not like these EMFs. It's essentially, it's radiation. As they said again, more research is needed, although we seem to be plowing ahead with these projects. You could go to the next one. So if we think that fish are impacted by EMFs, that's okay. This is what radar might look like. This is taken from a ship in the North Sea as it approached wind farms. It takes the dots that radar would normally have on a boat and it turns it into lines. It can scramble it. When I talked to that guy, Mike Pearden, on today, he said that, you know, they're suggesting that people buy some other fancy kind of GPS for their boats that's $35,000. So I think this is, you know, kind of problematic. This was from an article that we read a couple of months ago. There were pictures that there were lots of lobsters showing up deformed in the North Sea, and they are speculating that this is coming from the EMS, from the cabling. Again, more research needed. So let's talk about Nantucket for a minute. We mentioned that Nantucket is the largest national historic landmark in the nation, and that includes Tuckernuck and Muskeget, so it's the mix of all three islands. And we've been very, very fortunate on Nantucket that we have that status. It's actually really a huge deal. It's the protection under the Act gives us Section 106 protection. We actually on Nantucket have Section 110F protection. If anybody cares, that just means that we have the most stringent protection possible. That things must really be scrutinized before they impact our island. I know we have at least two people here that spend a lot of time making sure that Nantucket stays Nantucket so that we have these protections. I know Val Oliver and Tom Montgomery back there. I don't know if others here are involved with that, but it's a big deal. I know we complain that, you know, they won't let us paint our polka dots on our front door or and stuff like that, but when we think about it, they have managed to keep strip malls out of here. We don't have Dunkin' Donuts. We don't even have a traffic light. Nantucket is important because it has that historic value. It makes it why people want to come here. If there are strip malls and traffic lights and Dunkin' Donuts, I don't need to come to, you know, Hyannis and jackass it over on a ferry to come here. I can do that at the New Jersey shore. So it is very important that these protections stay in place, and we thank people like you guys for the hard work that you do to make that happen. So this map is a little bit weird, but it's just essentially showing you the pink area. For some reason, that's really the ocean. Can you see where Nantucket is? And it's just showing you that really the view shed will be impacted pretty much everywhere. All of the South Shore beaches and in from those beaches will be able to see all of these turbines. And in high places too, Alta Rock, Earl Point, Sanford Farm, Bartlett Farm, where they're a little bit raised, you will really be able to see this. And it's important to understand that the viewshed is important to Nantucket's National Historic Landmark status. It's, you know, it's the architecture here, it's the streetscapes here, it's the seascapes here, it's the viewshed here. Those were all components in the application for us to get that National Historic Landmark status. If those things are compromised, it jeopardizes our status with that, and then all bets are off. So I think it's really important that we consider the view shed and all of that.
Could you just explain what the view shed is?
Just the view, essentially.
It's like
It's
out
just
a
the
certain
view.
distance?
Yeah, I mean, you can see
To
to
the
the
horizon.
you can see to
Right.
the horizon, but you know the horizon, when you know you talk about, I forget how many miles you can see on the horizon, but these are elevated. Remember, 1,000 feet taller than the horizon, so it's further than what it would be at sea level. Okay, thanks, Vern. So we are worried about our dark skies here. This is what the dark skies look like on in the North Sea. You know, and it's deep. You have to understand, it's not just the front row of these things you will see. You'll be able to see more, so that will really impact the view.
Are those turbines? Those orange
Yeah,
things?
yeah. At night,
It's from a fishing boat.
it's from a fishing boat.
This is existing now?
Yes.
North
In the North Sea.
Where, this is huge. Where is the North Sea?
Like off of England, Great Britain, Northern Europe.
right.
Northern Europe.
North of Scotland.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the sticky part of the conversation. I'm always okay talking about this with people who don't live on Nantucket, but people who live on Nantucket, this is a little bit tricky, and I just want to start it out by saying this. The people who give their time to sit on the boards here and to be selectmen and to run the town and give their time are generous, and they do their best. I'm pretty sure that 90% of them do their best all the time. I know doesn't always run the way you want it to, and but they do the best typically with the information they have at hand at a point in time. So it is easy to look back on certain things. Hindsight is always 20/20. But this Good Neighbor Agreement is something that was signed by Nantucket that I want to talk to you about. Cultural Heritage Partners is a law firm that was secured by Nantucket. They claim on their website that they protect National Historic Landmarks, that they defend National Historic Landmarks. And I would suggest that that's not what happened in this case. Cultural Heritage Partners was secured by Nantucket, and I don't think they spent 5 minutes trying to defend or protect this island. I think they tried to work an arbitration deal between Nantucket and Vineyard Wind, and it became about money fast. I think that's their MO. They write up these Good Neighbor Agreements. They've done this in other municipalities, especially ones that have historic preservation at risk. They come to them and they say, hey, Nantucket, these are federal waters. You really don't have much to say here. And so we suggest that you should just take money, and we're going to help you get it. And oh, P.S., we're going to take a cut. Now, I don't really know what the cut exactly was that Nantucket got, because unfortunately, all of these meetings were held in private session behind closed doors. There are no minutes. But in other municipalities where that has been published, their cut was 27% of what they got. So that's more than a quarter. So I would suggest when we hear about the $16 million that Nantucket got on this deal, which I'm going to tell you about in a minute, that it was probably more like 12 in the end. So they put together a meeting. On one side they have Vineyard Wind, and on the other side was Nantucket. Now the Nantucket entities were Nantucket Town and County, so probably some representation, I'm sure, from the Select Board and maybe others, but it was also the Nantucket Preservation Trust and representatives from the Mariah Mitchell group, which would make sense, right? If you're going to have a negotiation, you're worried about your dark skies, your preservation, those are the groups that make sense. And in the end, what they signed was an agreement. Vineyard Wind said, here were the things that Vineyard Wind agreed to. This is what the agreement said. Vineyard Wind agreed to make sure that the turbines were painted gray so that they wouldn't be as viewable. Were they going to be pink? I don't know. I sort of think like steel and all of that. Like, I don't think that's a big concession to me. I think they said that they would take out the front row. The front row amounted to somewhere between 4 and 5 actual turbines. But then what happened is, I told you earlier, the turbine height grew. So 4 or 5 turbines in the front row. Again, not a big deal. These are small things. They said that they would commit to putting ADLS on top of the turbines. That's advanced detection lighting system. Basically like a clap on, clap off for aircraft. The technology doesn't exist. The FAA hasn't approved anything, but they said if and when that happens, that those would be on the turbines. But mind you, I told you earlier that there will be lights on these things regardless, because they have to worry about vessels. And then they said that we would give a trust that would be set up by those Nantucket entities, $16 million, and they could distribute it to the other organizations in town as needed, that there would be a trustee for that. On the flip side, what Nantucket agreed to was essentially not pushing back. They said that we will support this project at the local level, the state level, and the federal level. And that we won't push back, especially with respect to our National Historic Landmark status. So we said that we're not going to stand up for that. This is what was advised. They were advised to do this by these lawyers. So essentially, without being so crass, Nantucket got $16 million to shut up. Which I think, again, I wasn't in those meetings. I have no idea. I'm just looking at it again from 2020, from hindsight. But what I would suggest is that the real shame in this is that Nantucket has not communicated anything about these projects to the people here. When we talk to people, I've talked to a lot of you here, and plenty of people who live here over time, they do not know that this is happening. They have a lot of misconceptions about what's going on. And I think it's a shame because typically you want to bring all voices to a conversation to come up with the best plan. Here's something else that's kind of disappointing on the next slide. You guys all know about Save Our Sound. Yeah, no, it's really nice. About Save Our Sound, you guys know what that is. There was a Cape Wind project that was supposed to happen in Nantucket Sound. It all started about 20 years ago. Cape Wind was going to develop turbines, a wind farm within Nantucket Sound. It was very highly publicized because Ted Kennedy, at the time Senator of Massachusetts, was making a big stink that we don't want this here. They were highly funded by the Koch brothers. There was a lot of pushback, and over time they were able to get Cape Wind to back off. Eventually their investors just said this is costing us too much time and money, and we're out of here. And the project was shut down. Now, Cape Wind still, Save Our Sound, this organization still exists. I actually went to a fundraiser for it the other night, and I heard their executive director speak. Here's the thing. What they are planning to do now is try to get National Historic Landmark for Nantucket Sound, similar to what Nantucket Island and the Little Islands already have. They want to be protected, so they feel that if they have that status, like we have, that the wind farms won't be able to come in. Now, and one of the big reasons that they believe they can get that status, by the way, is that there are Indian burial grounds underneath the sea floor of the Sound. I guess back in the day, there was a lot more land, the waters receded a lot, and there are Indian burial grounds in there. And they don't want turbines being pile driven into Indian burial grounds. So that's what they're attempting to do. So they're very worried about that. But interestingly, if you look on this slide, and we sort of did an overlay, this screen underneath is, if you go to their website and you look at their supporters, you see the town of Nantucket, and there are a couple of other organizations on Nantucket. They're all over the Cape, they're all over Martha's Vineyard, because the Cape, Martha's Vineyard, and Nantucket are what engulf the Sound. So that would make sense. But you'll also notice in the bottom left, Vineyard Wind. And there's other wind companies also. So why would the wind companies be supporting this? Well, Veronica over here, Detective Bonet, found that and then did a deeper dive on their website and looked in a different section where it shows, these are their supporters, by the way. I don't know if I made that clear. Town of Nantucket, these are all people that support them doing what they're doing. But also on the website, this organization is supporting offshore wind 14 miles south of Nantucket. So they don't want it in the Sound, but they're perfectly okay with the Vineyard Wind Project and all the other projects on the other side of Nantucket.
They won't see it.
Does that sound awful?
Yeah, we should not let them
So,
get
do
any
you
more
guys
money.
understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's a little tricky to explain this.
I think
So,
that was always the position where
not
that
my
wanted,
backyard,
is that
yeah.
we don't want it here, but you can put it
Yeah.
out there.
so what's interesting is though that they want to
Not my
have,
backyard.
they want to have, well, it's the ultimate, but they want to have National Historic Landmark status because that's so important. Yet what's so fascinating is we already have it, and they don't mind jeopardizing ours. One question I asked that I didn't get a good answer at that meeting was, so I know you're worried about them pile driving because of the Indian burial grounds. What do you think about the cables that are going to come from your Vineyard Wind Project that have to be plow driven right to the middle of the Sound? And I got a non-answer. She said they would have to do that. That was the answer. So anyway, enough of being mean.
Can I just interject
Yeah.
one thing? Another reason that is so important is when we talk to people on Nantucket and we tell them, do you know about this? Are you worried about it? A lot of people say, that's what Save Our Sound is doing.
Yeah,
They're
they think
protecting
that's true.
Nantucket. And a lot of people
Yep.
feel that this organization is protecting Nantucket. And that's another reason to highlight it. Sorry.
No, that's perfect. So we can go to the next one when we have a sec. Okay, so this is, these dots just represent where they've seen North Atlantic right whales. We're gonna flip back to the whales for a few minutes. Where they've been spotting whales. So you'll see if you look, I don't know if you can see tiny Nantucket right here. Lots of them are right in this area where they are planning to put the wind farms. And again, this is an endangered species. I think it's the largest endangered mammal that there is. This is their safe haven. There are fewer than 400 of these left. And again, Nantucket's all about the whales, so I think this is pretty incredible. I have to say, I have questioned many times, why here? Why would this be the first one? Why is this the experiment? I have a hard time getting my head around that, and I've often wondered, is it because Nantucket is small and that there are a lot of houses and then a lot of the people leave and then they're left with very few people who work their butts off, with some people here with more than one job, and then they have to give their time doing all the council stuff and all the other things that have to happen to make this, because it's small. Is that why? I think it's kind of a disgrace.
Well, and when they first pitched it, it was February.
Right.
Of the pandemic or something, right?
I mean, no,
Yeah.
before, a little before 2019 at the Athenaeum. I think there was like 15 people there, and I was like, what?
So we can go to the next one. While we're talking about whales, this is just a little plug for whales and Mother Nature. Whales sequester a lot of carbon dioxide. Mother Nature had this thing pretty well set up that, trees give us oxygen and whales get rid of carbon dioxide. They eat carbon dioxide. We breathe in oxygen and emit carbon dioxide. Anyway, I just thought that we think that's just kind of a cool thing. They sort of naturally help us get rid of greenhouse gases. All right, let's go to the next one. We're going to get mean again. That's not it.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, this one. So one of the things that we've wondered all along is how come our little group seems to be the only people complaining about this. There are a lot of major NGOs in this country that claim to protect the whale. Save the whale, do this for the whale. And yet it's astounding how silent that they've been. One thing I've been saying to people is, of all the stakeholders in the offshore wind enterprise, I feel like the only ones really doing their job are the wind companies, ironically. They are trying to make money for their investors, they're making money for their shareholders, they're finding new frontiers, they're figuring out new ways to develop business. And they have been very clever in getting people that might be opposed to it to quiet down. They have really shut down public opposition. I talked to you earlier about what's happened with what happened here at the local level. This is also happening, decision makers at the state level and at the federal level are making some big leaps here. They're not paying attention to their own laws. They're not, as we said, how many of those slides did I show you about sound and EMFs and weather, that future research is needed, yet they're plowing ahead here. So they're not really doing their job. And unfortunately, legislators really can't be experts in every area by any means, but they do depend on NGOs for information, okay? And these non-government organizations are also now not doing their job because they have taken money from the wind companies. There was a report that came out this spring that was from the Save the Right Whale Coalition, a group that we're not affiliated with, but we've had some contact with them. And they did a follow the money paper trail and found that many NGOs, the Sierra Club, Mystic Aquarium, Center for Coastal Studies, I mean, there were tons of them, and the New England Aquarium, all had taken big money from the wind companies, and therefore they're compromised. I mean, right away, they can't be honest if they're taking money like that. In particular, the New England Aquarium has been extremely disappointing, if you ask me. The New England Aquarium has, the Cabot Center is all about North Atlantic right whales. It's what it's about. And unfortunately, I met actually with the chief marine biologist there. He's a lovely guy, John Mandelman. He spoke on Nantucket a few weeks ago. He really is a tremendous guy. And I asked him, I said, how come you guys aren't screaming about this? How have you taken money from these wind companies? And their response is that they would like to have a seat at the table in helping to make the decisions for the siting and where we put the wind farms. So how's that going? I don't think so great. So it's really kind of disappointing. But more than not pushing back and screaming. They are signaling to the public and signaling to the decision makers that this is okay. And I think that's where things kind of really go off the rails. We'll go to the next one. The next one is really just talking about, there are tons of misconceptions. This just lists a bunch of them. And again, kind of, going back to that good neighbor agreement, I think that really hurt Nantucket. I really hope that you'll talk to your select board about breaking that agreement. I think that agreement is problematic because it's not allowing the conversation to happen. People here are not informed, and they think this is a done deal. This is not a done deal, and I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute. You can go to the next one. You can all read these, I hope, right? So, Nantucket Residents Against Turbines, or ACK Residents Against Turbines, is the organization that we were talking about that Val founded. We have a pretty serious lawsuit going. It's filed against the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, BOEM, which is part of the Department of the Interior, and it's against NOAA Fisheries, which is the Department of Commerce. And we are essentially saying, without reading the whole thing to you, that U.S. government, you are not following your own endangered species and environmental protection laws. That's kind of the gist of it. We think that the reports that they are going by are deficient, they're incomplete. They are only looking at small pieces of this, not cumulative effects. They're not doing their job. So I think that we filed a summary of Judgment. I'm not a lawyer, but I guess if you were in a courtroom, this is sort of like your opening argument and bringing all your witnesses, but it's written up in a big, huge filing. And the next step will be that those agencies will come back with their opening statement and their argument. We'll have a chance to come back again with a rebuttal, and then the judge will make a decision. So I think we'll know something in February, what this means in terms of stalling these projects, we'll hope we'll have you behind us. Just a couple more points. On the next one, I sort of touched on this before. Renewable is not synonymous with green. I think people need to really understand that. Those two words are slung around all the time as if they're the same thing. They're not. Renewable, wind is 100% renewable. The wind blows and we don't use up wind. It doesn't go away, so we think. We don't know. But so we
And it doesn't always blow.
And it doesn't always blow. But it is, but I've talked to you about this project, and you can make up your own decision. But it doesn't really sound very green. It's renewable. But we are making a power plant, and a very big power plant, out in the ocean. And I think it's important to understand that energy has different densities. This type of energy is not dense. It requires lots of space to create this amount of energy versus something like nuclear. And I'm not espousing any kind, but just to show you the difference. You could put a nuclear reactor on my property and it could power Massachusetts. So there are, it is just not, it does a lot of damage. You see how much of the earth this takes up and all the damage that has to be caused. That has to be taken into consideration when you're talking about whether or not it's green. And I will tell you, in the construction and operations plan, the adverse effects of this have been redacted. We can't even see what they estimate as from the government. We can't see what they're anticipating.
How is that allowed?
Yeah, how is that allowed?
National security.
Yeah, probably.
But national, yeah.
And then there's just really one more main slide here. Wind energy is not reliable and wind energy is not cheap. Now, there will be people that will talk to you about this otherwise. There are lots of voices on this. But I will tell you one thing. In countries where energy is cheap and accessible and reliable, infant mortality rates are low and life expectancy is high. Those are industrialized countries that have been able to harness reliable, relatively inexpensive energy. It's a game changer. Energy is life. In countries that don't have that, they don't have those same luxuries, they don't have that same quality of life because their lifespans are simply shorter. So I think that we need to be responsible with how we use energy, and I don't have all the solutions. I'm not in that field. I'm not an energy expert, but I think in the last 50 years in America, even with fossil fuels that we don't like, we have done a much better job mitigating those. I think there are other sources that we can use. I think, and maybe wind one day will be it, But right now, it is not. It is not a reliable source of energy. When wind is not blowing, there is no power. Okay, all you need to do is look at Germany and see what's gone on over there over the last year. The wind stopped blowing. They call it the big still. Okay, and this winter they became very reliant upon a pipeline from Russia. Everybody's reading the news. You know how that's going. Germany is in the process of firing up all of its coal plants because they've got no other option. Coal,
'Cause they
which
shut
is
all
the
their nukes.
dirtiest, right? They shut down all their nukes and that. So they are. It is not reliable, and their energy prices are X times what ours is. Okay, last year I think ours were like 13 cents per kilowatt hour. In Germany last year it was 80 something cents per kilowatt hour. So I think there's a lot to learn about this, and I think what really should happen is that we should probably look before we leave, do the studies, and take a little bit more time on this. And just
Yeah.
the last slide is this. So we're going to just head back to the whale, and you know, hopefully that all of you will think about this and be concerned and try to help protect our beautiful island and our whales. If you want to check us out, we're at ackrats.com. We have some bumper stickers for you if you want those. We have some flyers, and I don't know if anybody has any questions. We can try to answer them. I don't know if we can. Sure, class.
So who right now is responsible at the end of the life of service, whether it be 15